One of the prevailing themes in our readings today is that suffering is an integral part of our life. But the good thing is that it could also be our road to glory. In the first reading, it tells us that Jeremiah became the object of ridicule and mockery. All he did was to deliver God's message to the people. In our psalm, King David sings, "O God, you are my God. For you I long. For you my soul is thirsting. My body pines for you, like a dry land weary without water. So I gaze at you in the sanctuary. You have been my help. In the shadow of your wings, I rejoice." This is King David suffering. He wrote this when he was in the wilderness, trying to flee and hide from the people who wanted to kill him. He was in a very rough place, so different from his palace life. But this did not stop him in singing praises for God. In the second reading, Paul tells us that we need to present our bodies as a living sacrifice to God. And this is possible only by rejecting the unholy and secular behavior of the world around us. And then, in our gospel, Jesus tells us to deny ourselves, to take up our crosses and follow him. Again, this is a very difficult vocation from God, as this means that we need to get rid of our earthly desires, to be selfless, serving and helping others until it hurts, and that we should live our lives according to the commandments of God. Yes, our today's readings are a painful reminders that suffering is part of our reality. But you know who is also part of our reality? Jesus. Suffering is part of our reality, and so is Jesus. One of the questions that I always hear is that, is suffering from God? We were always told that everything comes from God, and I agree with that. Everything comes from God except evil. According to St. John Paul II, suffering is not from God. As suffering is evil. We suffer when we are in the presence of evil, and that is the absence of good. What should we do if we are suffering then? We just need to endure it and do nothing about it? One of the things that St. John Paul II wrote about suffering is that our suffering can also be joined with the sufferings of Christ for our own salvation and for the salvation of others. I actually really like this theology. This is why when someone comes to me and they tell me that they are in great pain or in great suffering, it doesn't matter if it's spiritual, mental, or physical. One of the things that I tell them is to offer up their sufferings to the Lord. Unite their sufferings with Christ on the cross. The theology that I was trying to impart then is just like Christ could suffer for others, so we too can suffer for others. And by doing so, our sufferings then will be our oblations to God. One of the revelations of Jesus to Saint Faustina, he said, I thirst for the salvation of souls. Help me, my daughter, to save souls. Join your sufferings to my passion and offer them to Heavenly Father for sinners. Again, we are offering our suffering not because Jesus needs it, nor his suffering on the cross was not enough. But since suffering is not from God, it is useless. So why don't we turn it into something useful and meaningful? As Saint Faustina wrote, my sacrifice is nothing in itself, but when I join it to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, it becomes all-powerful. By dying on the cross, Jesus had taught us that suffering, he can turn it into a sacrifice, a useful offering to God. Do the same. Offer your sufferings to the Lord. And mysteriously, just like the cross, God can use it to save souls. Today, Jesus invited us, if you want to be my disciple, deny yourselves, take up your cross, and follow me. This shows us that there are sufferings in life. And Christ does not explain in the abstract the reason for suffering. But before all else, he says, follow me, come. Take part through your suffering in this work of saving the world. A salvation achieved through my suffering, through my cross. Gradually, as the individual takes up his cross, spiritually uniting himself to the cross of Christ, the salvific meaning of suffering is revealed to him. When we face suffering, remember this invitation of Christ. Accept these sufferings and turn them into an offering to God, and ask him to use it to help those most in need, those who are heading towards damnation. And soon, our sufferings will turn it into eternal happiness for others.